Bob Forrest, it is such a pleasure to see you again. I haven't seen you in ages.
It's been years. It's crazy.
Years. So a lot of people might not know this, but I was on Celebrity Rehab, season 4, I believe it was. And you were a big hero to me then, but that's when I met you. This was I think it was 2010, so quite a while ago. But we basically spent 3 weeks together.
Yeah, it was the greatest. And I remember, and I see people when they're pulled back and forth, and you were pulled back and forth, like everybody's telling you not to do it, but you want to do it to speak your truth, but you can't speak your truth. And it's just like the chaos. I remember it was so hard for you to be there. Yeah. Because you're being torn. And so many people in treatment are like that, not under your circumstances, but they want to get back to their kids, or they're there because other people want them to be there, but they don't really want to be there. And that you were a great definition of so many people that are in treatment that are torn about being there. Right? Do you remember that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I was being torn because my lawyer at the time was like, "Oh, we can't have you on the show because it violates your NDA."
Is there any lawyer that wants somebody on Celebrity Rehab?
Right, of course. But here's the thing. I was there for love addiction. And I will say we had 80 pages of a whole thing that VH1 had to sign saying that we wouldn't talk about the obvious elephant in the room. Yeah. But I had major things that I could deal with, which was the loss of my father and the loss of my fiance on September 11th. My father died from a cocaine overdose when I was 15 and he was 44. And that's what I dealt with on the show and what it was like to have love addiction. I remember when I went in with Drew, sitting there the night before you guys started filming, it was, I guess, on a Sunday or something. And I was like, there's no way I'm doing this. But when I sat down with him, and you may have even been there that night, I can't remember, but I was like, oh, I need this. Like, I didn't believe in love addiction. I didn't know what it was, but I was like, oh, I need to go to this because I was so lost. And people always talk about how reality shows are not real. To me, that was the most real 3 weeks that I've ever experienced. I mean, I got so much help. I really bonded with that group, even though we kind of hated each other half the time. Remember me and Janice and how I left?
And
I left
Jason,
the house.
And Jason. Sadly.
Yeah, sadly. Yeah, we've had, and that's the other thing. We had 8 people in the house, and 2 people out of the 8 have since died from drug addictions, which is incredibly sad. And then from all your episodes, I mean, how many do you think at this point have?
I think it's 7 have died.
Yeah.
So 7. and what's sad is we keep telling people addicts die. This is a deadly disease. Then when they do, the public blames Dr. Drew. It's just like there's this transference of anger towards addicts, and it's still going on to this day. I deal with it all the time. And the newest thing is prescription drug mom addicts. Like they're the devil, and it's almost like the Salem witch trials against mothers. You got institutional things like DCFS and child services. It's okay for dads to be addicts, but it's not okay for moms to be addicts. It's just unbelievable how hypocritical our society is.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I see it all the time in New York City. I mean, I live in Florida now, but it was like always, the talk about who was on pills, and if they were
fit or unfit.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
But they never ask if the dads are fit or unfit.
Right. Well, that's true. But wait, to go back to one thing about Celebrity Rehab, I just want to say it's interesting because people, you're right, would later on get a quote or have Dr. Drew on their show to talk about it. And it would kind of almost blame the show. And I want to actually say something because I wasn't there, obviously, for a quote unquote substance abuse issue.
Yeah.
But everyone else was. I mean, from heroin to, to benzos to whatever it was, right? And I witnessed these people who, yes, got paid because they were celebrities, but that to me is something that people need to stop and think about for a second. Who gives a shit what took them to get into treatment for those 3 weeks? Because they stopped what they were doing. They were in a place where they were like going down a path that was really dangerous. And for those 3 weeks, they were given the opportunity to figure it out, to clean it up, to get better, to change their path. If they chose not to once they left, that's on them. but I can attest to when I was there and the people that I've become friends with from seasons before and after, that was a moment in time where they were really getting help. And I want people to know that it was more than a show. And even though the celebrities got paid to be there, they were getting clean for those 3 weeks. So everyone should appreciate that. And they got the actual tools to use to go forward.
And access to information. So I'm doing this new idea, which is DNA for addiction. Everybody says, well, what is it? And you want specificity and definition. And I say, it's just another tool. It's another tool that you can have. We are too much of a society that wants doctors to fix us, other people to fix us, rather than you get tools and information and you fix yourself. That's just not an American tradition anymore. It's more like, give me a pill, give me a guru book, give me a podcast on CrossFit, do all these things, and outside sources fix me. Right. Rather than we know that you're the only one that has the motivation, the connectivity to fix yourself. But when I was reading about your podcast, congratulations. I was telling you before air, like I get so many people ask me how to do a podcast or what to do. I've had a podcast since before they were called podcasts, but I just want to get the message out about overdose death and music and life and have my small little following. But it survived for 10, 12 years or something in different amalgamations. But people want to have a podcast and then they think you're just going to become Mark Maron. You know what I mean? No, it's hard work. You have to have a great concept and you need to know how to talk. Right. And I think the one thing why podcasts are so popular is people don't converse anymore. So then thus people don't know how to talk. Yeah. I was at the bank the other day and a bunch of millennials and Xers and Zers or whatever they are. And then there was this old couple behind me. And I didn't have my phone and they looked like they didn't have phones. And everyone else in the bank, including some of the people that work there, are all on their phones. And we all made an old people joke, like, what would they do if they didn't have their phones? Right. Well, they'd be talking. And it was a long line at the bank. And the three of us talked for like 15, 20 minutes just about grandkids. And, they were sad that their daughter had moved to Texas and the grandkids are far away now and from California. Just people don't do that anymore. They're all glued to their phones, so they don't know how to talk. So for some reason, what's podcasts? They're just conversations, and people are eavesdropping on conversations because they don't have them and society doesn't, everybody's on their phones. Right.
Like a fly on the wall experience.
Gathering useless information.
Right. Well, I want to talk about something you brought up. This thing of DNA for addiction. Yeah. Can we talk about what that is? Because it was very interesting.
Well, I tell the story. When I went to Hazelden, my first rehab in 1987, I walked in the door. I paid $14,000 of my own hard-earned money. Well, not so hard-earned. I was a singer. It wasn't that hard to earn it. But I went there. And I'm thinking, and I'm getting attaboys from all my friends and the people that did the intervention on me, and I'm going to rehab, and I get there, and as soon as I walk in the door, they tell you, you've got a disease, you're gonna die, and I'm like, whoa. Everybody is so happy at the airport, like, now you're coming at me. And so as the first week rolled around, it was the first time I was introduced to the disease concept. And they kept saying I have a genetic basis for it. So, I'm a smart aleck and an entitled prince, and I said to my counselor, like, I want to take this genetic test. If you're saying I have a genetic disease, I want to see it. Yeah, predisposition. And immediately they did what they always do in rehab, which is blame the patient. So they said, well, see, that's your disease. That's denial. And I was like, whoa, you're telling me, I walked in here, you're telling me I have a disease that it's genetically based and that I'm going to die of it. Shouldn't I be tested for it?
Right.
And they actually didn't have a test. It was just a theory. Right. So then over time, I've been kind of obsessed with, what is the genetic test? And Dr. Drew talked about it when we were on the show. Mm-hmm. So there was a genetic markers done by UCLA, but to test for it was so expensive, and it is kind of vague. It's not a genetic marker that says you're going to love OxyContin. It's more nuanced than that. It's the sensitivity to light and sound. It's attunement to environment, and it's more in the emotional part of the makeup of a person. So why is that the area where you see consistent patterns of positivity in addicts? Why is that? Well, if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. So what do you hear? What did you hear from Jason and all the people on Celebrity Rehab? When they had their first drink or they took their first pill, they felt so perfect. They felt like how they thought everyone else felt, right? Well, if you're hypersensitive to people's moods and the environment and sounds, when you numb that for the first time, you're going to feel relief from the intensity, noise, cacophony of life. And so when I found that out from Dr. Drew and the doctor who kind of discovered the theory of it, it made perfect sense to me. I just never felt right. Well, why did I never feel right? Because I can look at somebody's face and know they're in a bad mood in 2 seconds. I don't even have to look at them. I can sense them in my in my central nervous system that something's wrong. If you hear a loud sound, you're highly attuned and wanting to suss it out. So it's a survival mechanism that we no longer need. We're not being eaten by wild animals and we're not being killed by Huns. So why does this exist? It's a survival mechanism. We would have been the great survivors 1,000 years ago, but now with air conditioning and cars and trucks and safety, you don't really need it. And so that's what the marker is. It tells you if you have that hypersensitivity to environment. It doesn't mean you're going to be a drug addict.